You think Common Ground is worth a buck? Consider leaving a tip at lptv.org. Lakeland Public Television presents Common Ground, brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Welcome to Common Ground. We're off to Breezy Point to join a quilting club and then back to Bemidji for a taste of Japanese poetry.
This is an offshoot of Pine Tree Patchworkers, which is the Quilting Guild in Brainerd. And there's a few different groups that meet, and ours meets the third Tuesday every month in the Breezy Point area. And so we all come together with our own projects and bring our lunch, stay from 9 to 4, and sew, yak, talk, solve problems, and just have a great time. What I'm doing is I'm quilting the 3 layers together from a table runner that I pieced. And so I've got the top layer that I pieced, the batting and the backing, and I stitched in the ditch is what it's called. I run a thread along where I've pieced so you don't really see the quilting except for on the back. And then on the appliqué, I've done a blanket stitch, which is also a machine stitch. And just it fastens it down because I've used the heat tempered glue. So the next thing that I have to do is trim the edges and put the binding on.
This is going to be a king-size quilt. It's called Rocky Mountain Puzzle, and it's like an anvil quilt. And it's going to need 200 of the full squares and like 48 side and top half squares. And I've got some done over on this table over here, but right now I'm just putting the strips together, and it's got what we call sashing. I go to a quilt retreat, and another lady had done it, and I fell in love with it. So like 3 of us from that quilt retreat are doing this quilt right now. I've never made this big of a quilt. It's just got a king-size bed last year, and I wanted to have a special quilt. Yeah. This has taken me a year to put all these together because there's a lot of triangles in the quilt. So, and I'm doing it out of what we call Civil War fabrics. So they're replicas of the Civil War fabrics that were produced during and after the Civil War. And I've tried to keep true to that with the backing called shirtings. This is one corner. This is the corner. So I'm just going up, so I start with 1 and then 3, and then it's 5, and then 7, then 9, then 11, then 13, then 15, then 17, then 19, and it's going to just grow.
I'm making a baby quilt. I've got 8 baby quilts to make for friends' grandkids. So I thought I better get going and work on them. I started working on this at 4 o'clock this morning. I was so excited to work on it. I got out of bed and started. I went on a quilt bus trip 2 years ago and got a pattern, and I started cutting out all these fabrics for that pattern, and then I changed my mind and thought it was too hard, so then I'm making it into something else. I'm sewing all these purple strips on, and then eventually, this is my pattern, I'm going to sew them all together. And then I've got one more strip that's at home that'll go over here.
My name is Peggy Anderson, and I live in May Township. And I'm working on placemats for Meals on Wheels in the Brainerd Lakes area. Each January, every senior citizen on Meals on Wheels gets a new placemat to use for the year. I put 4 pieces of fabric down on top of each other, and I slice, and then I take one from each stack until I get 4 different colors. and sew them together, quilt them, and now I'm just putting the binding on. And they have batting in between, make it nice and smooth. It's just a matter of hand stitching like you're hemming something. It's already been sewn on this side by machine, and now this side I'm finishing it by hand. And it just kind of makes it look a little more finished, a little more dressed.
This is embroidering, and I am eventually going to make a bird quilt to go in my bedroom, which is a bird-themed bedroom. And I have the other squares laying out over there. There will be 12 in all, and then piecework in between. I'm just back into embroidering. Quilting is my first love, and I've been doing quilting for about 35 years. Ooh, that makes me sound really old, doesn't it? So yeah, about 35 years. And I do a lot of quilting for myself and for my children and for charitable organizations.
I am making simple dresses for an organization, a charitable organization called Little Dresses for Africa that I actually learned about on PBS, on the Nancy Zeman Quilt Show on Saturdays. And what they are is very simple dress designs that are sent to young girls in various African countries, as well as Haiti, Guatemala, and a couple other more third world countries, just to give them more of a sense of worth. Apparently, girls in these countries are not valued very much, and the founder of the organization wanted to come up with a way to make little girls special.
I am making a checkerboard sashing for a wall hanging that has decorative houses on it. When I was a small child, my grandmother sewed by hand quilt blocks together, and she used fabric that was left over from garments that were sewn. My mother was an avid dressmaker, and so any of our leftover fabrics my grandmother put into quilts. In quilting, I like picking out the colors and the fabrics. I just love to try to make unique, different colors come together and work together on things and stuff. And then I like the piecing. But once I get the pieces put together, then I hand it over to a machine quilter to quilt it. So I say I machine quilt it by writing a check.
I have always been drawn to making quilts for children, and I found this fabric and I had to have it. One of them is going to go to Habitat for Humanity, and the other one is going to go to the Gillette Children's Hospital in St. Paul. The one for Habitat Humanity will be part of a raffle, and it will include, besides the quilt, it will include a storybook, a Curious George storybook about dinosaurs, and will also include a stuffed dinosaur. It's cool. It makes me feel very good. I enjoy doing them. They're not as intricate as some of the other quilts that are here today, but they go together pretty quickly, and choosing the colors was fun. You start with the central print and then just go from there. Time to stop. My bobbin is empty.
This is a wish quilt. It's a Christmas project, and this is one of the quilt blocks that I finished this block, and then these all yet are not finished. They still need borders on them, and then when I'm all finished with them, I will put them together and then put a scallop border around the outside of them. All the patterns have names, and this one is just called the Wish Quilt. And here's a block that actually says Wish on it.
What I'm doing is I'm working on quilts that were started by my wife, who passed away last year. And part of it is that I just can't allow her work to go unfinished, and part of it is just to stay in touch with her. And plus, this is fun. and so I decided I'm going to do some quilting. She's got enough fabric for 200 quilts. I don't think I'm going to do 200, but I'm going to get some done anyway. This is a quilt that she started, I can't say when, but sometime in the last year or so. And fortunately, in this case, I have her drawing, her pattern, so it's an easy one for me to figure out and put together. It's a fairly simple quilt, large blocks and sashing strips, so it's not technically really complicated. But I'm practicing with precision is what it requires. I'm an engineer actually by background, and so the precision and the planning and the execution part of it is kind of interesting to me. I'm not necessarily got the artist eye that she had, that's for sure. But I'm learning from her, even though she's not here.
I blog about my quilting. I teach a class at Colors for Quilts in Brainerd. I have a group that meets once a month, and we do appliqué, embroidery, and a lot of handwork. And so to kind of help me show them different things that after they leave class, they can refer back to on my blog, lessons that we covered and techniques. So that's pretty much why I started blogging. Right now I'm working on a quilt that it's fusible appliqué, and it's wool appliqué. So you trace the designs onto this fusible paper, which has a heat reactive glue on the back. And then when you peel off the paper, the glue stays on your fabric, and then you can adhere it to your background fabric. And then what I do is embroider around each piece. So that will get fused right in place there. Once you remove the paper, there's a heat-activated adhesive on the back of the fabric. This is a wool fabric. And then you place it on your background where you want it, and then you would fuse it in place. This I have to put something under. His little wing is going to go under there, so I won't fuse him in place yet. But so I've been placing my leaves around on this block. And then after you've got them placed, you will go back with a floss, different color threads that match your backgrounds, or your appliques, I should say, and embroider around them to keep them in place. This one was designed by a quilt shop owner from Wisconsin, Menasha, Wisconsin. And what she did, she sent out the pattern every week this summer for 13 weeks. So, and you really didn't know what it was going to look like until the end. She just, would send blocks, and those are all the blocks. This will go in the center of those bigger blocks. They'll go around it. So it was kind of a mystery. And I guess what drew me to it were the words. There's words inked on each block, and then the name of the quilt is Words to Live By. And it was kind of a different technique. You use a permanent pen and you ink the words on there rather than embroidering them or something like that. So it was just kind of a different technique and a different look to a quilt. So that's why I wanted to do it. And it was kind of fun to see what the next week's word would be. And I think that's what adds a lot of the detail to it.
Anybody can come. Some of the gals here don't belong to the guild, but we just invited them because there's a lot of room. The Conservation Club has been very welcoming to us, and so we just enjoy getting together. Anybody who sews can come and just bring their own projects.
I'm Marsh Muirhead. I'm a Bemidji area dentist and have been so for over 30 years. Also, I've been a flight instructor, used to be a competitive bodybuilder, writer. I live on the Mississippi, about 3 miles out of town, and Bemidji is in many ways the perfect place for observing the idiosyncrasies of life and the beauty of nature, and I try to record all that in the various kinds of writing that I do.
I'd like to welcome you to an evening with poet Marsh Muirhead. Our spoken word series crew was excited to learn, as I'm sure you were, that Marsh published his book of haiku for Cold Martini last month. We're happy to report that it is already getting rave reviews.
Thank you all for coming. This is just a great turnout. Very happy to see you all. And in that long line of introduction, it's interesting that I've been a dentist for 35 years. It's always kind of a minor point in the list. But interestingly, in 35 years, I've never written a haiku about dentistry. And I think it's because they would just be too painful. First, I'll start with just an invocation. It's a short poem, and it's about the poet's task, I guess, about the writer's task. I don't know where he said this, but Will Weaver over here, one time at a reading or at a workshop, said, in order to be a good writer, a successful writer, you should like people. Do you remember this? No. We're getting older. But I think that the task of poetry isn't just to be a writer, it's to say something to other people, maybe open up some little truths, and somehow encompass your arms around your readers and make them happy or part of your table. So anyway, this is a little poem called Wait, sort of an invocation to poetry for both the reader and the writer. What waits inside this poem might be of any size or weight. A thin, shiny dime, for example, or something thicker, like a nickel, but worth only half as much. Love has weight, and work, a conversation seen at a distance, feathers or cannonballs tossed between souls across the room. My sister and I would split my father's change. She liked the brown ones. Bigger than the dimes, I sorted to myself, being older. And I often wonder about my own weight and worth, if I've spent myself wisely or kindly, still in the black, so to speak, some change left in my pocket. Thank you.
Well, there's kind of the standard version that they teach in elementary school and that civic organizations promote when they have a contest, and that's supposedly it was a 5-syllable, 7-syllable, 5-syllable poem, 17 syllables total, that expresses some image or some poignant mini story in some sense. But in fact, the 17-syllable haiku hasn't been written by serious haiku poets for generations, but there's still a small subset of haiku poets, and you can find them online and so on, that write in 17 syllables. But the truer, more important essence of the haiku is that in about a breath, or in something less than 17 syllables in English, anyway, you say something kind of profound or interesting that has a little snap or a little insight or a little aha moment in it. And it's usually one image compared with a second image, or an image that is somehow transformed into something sort of amazing or wonderful. But subtle. It's a light stroke. One of mine, maybe it will illustrate that. Longest night of the year, no answer for the owl. Longest night of the year would be a specific time of the year, mid-December. No answer for the owl. So suddenly you've got a person that's outside in the wintertime. This actually is based on an experience I had camping out at an island in the Mississippi by myself. It's cold, kind of lonely, but there to experience that loneliness, which is a useful thing for the soul, I think. And there was one owl out there by himself as well that was doing the little barred owl sound of, I'll try this. And there were no owls answering that particular owl. He was alone, I was alone, we had this little kind of bond. So in that 3 little lines, longest night of the year, you do 2 of the things that haiku are supposed to have, and that's a season reference and a season. You've got winter, a specific day, then a little event or a second image. Besides the cold, long night in December, you have an owl, and then the poet recording it without intruding too much And if you listen to that, most people will go, oh, it's kind of neat, kind of sad.
In the Japanese tradition of haiku, the three elements that are usually always there are, in sort of the Buddhist tradition, the transience of life, which elicits a kind of melancholy or sadness, which is not to be regarded as a tragedy, but sort of a celebration of our mutual connection in our short trip on this world. So it's about transience, our interconnections, and that melancholy. The reason we are sad is sometimes we stare into an evening fire, watch the sea crash on the beach, or lay on our back and look at the stars. Haiku do the same sorts of things. So when we say, October moon, everything on this side or the other, sort of makes you think of that, the eternal, the planets. We get very philosophical, kind of sad. But I like sad things. Haiku poets steal from one another a lot. A lot of writing workshop people will say, good writers borrow from other writers, great writers, or those that aspire to be great writers, steal. So Billy Collins' a poem about just me and this eel. Skinny dipping in a mountain creek. Just me and this ouzel. And Craig Benson back there will know. He and I were hiking one time in the mountains west of Red Lodge. And in the morning you don't need to clean up and you get in the mountain creek, it's very cold. And you kind of, that's what the ouzel does. Although they're eating, they're picking bugs off the floor of the creek. So skinny dipping in a mountain creek, just me and this ouzel.
Haiku are sort of like the punchline or the end of a story for the poet, but the listener can provide their own story. It'll equally serve as a punchline to their story. Like, 3 a.m., the call that doesn't come fills the house. 3 a.m., the call that doesn't come fills the house. Everyone can relate to that. Who's had a missing child, a missing lover, being cheated on, a dying relative. And that's the way they work. And as I recite these now, they seem sort of straightforward and they would be easy to write, but when you sit down to write one from scratch, they're very difficult. So I always tell students, read 100 of them and then try to write one for a while. Read another 100, write one for a while. And maybe once, if you work a few hours a week at it, you might come up with one or two a month that are good.
Mountain pool. The trout points the way to the glacier. Mountain pool, the trout points the way to the glacier. Summer squall. The lily pads hold the pond in place. And this is called the anti-haiku, which is about all the rules you want to break when they've just become too oppressive. Releasing the animals. The anti-haiku. I'm releasing the animals from their 3-barred jails, the 17 shackles of their confinement, the prohibition keeping them from seasons not their own, setting the frogs free of that plop in water, cicadas, their summer slavery, walking sticks, herons, beetles and geese, free to travel any month, any climate, accepted in comparison, not a cutting word in sight. Crows allowed a wedding in the tropics, the cemetery vacant. Let the rabbit in winter reside in Palm Springs. Let all of them be like something else if they like. Let seam be the finale of any line. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Join me again next time for Common Ground. If you have an idea for a Common Ground piece that pertains to North Central Minnesota, email us at legacy@lptv.org or call us 218-333-3022. To view any episode of Common Ground online, visit us at lptv.org. To order individual segments or entire episodes of Common Ground, please call 218-333-3020. Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people on the 4th of November, 2008.